What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so it seems like an eternity, but we are covering The Hunt for Wolverine. Now, this is a one-shot. For those of you guys who are new to comics and you don't really know what a one-shot means, different publishers treat it different ways, but by and large, a one-shot is basically a way of saying, like, here is the new direction, quote unquote, that like either an entire publication house like Marvel and DC is going in, or a series is going in, like the Uncanny X-Men Heroic Age one-shot, or like the New Avengers Illuminati one-shot, or something like that. Sometimes publishers will use it as a way to like test something out, right? Like the New Avengers Illuminati one-shot, that was originally just one comic, and it proved to be incredibly popular. And so we got a mini-series based out of it. If it had proved to be even more popular, which it did, then we get a whole ongoing series out of it, which is Jonathan Hickman's New Avengers Volume 3. And so with this whole thing that goes on with this, take for example, like DC Rebirth. Like we got DC Universe Rebirth #1. That's a one-shot. It's designed to basically say, here's the new direction of DC Comics going forward to however long it is until we change things up again. I don't know. But this is basically designed to say, like, here's where Wolverine stands right now. Now, following this, and what Marvel's going to do is they're going to do like the Where is Wolverine, and it's going to be a series of mini-series. So it's going to be like I think four-part series, if I remember correctly. And then there's also like the story that has like all the little mini stories of Wolverine at the end of like all these comics that are all going to be put together into one big story. So it's kind of a big deal. And truth to tell, if I'm being honest, I actually think the return of Wolverine and all the things that are building up to it are going to prove to be, if not already, like more popular than like Marvel's Infinity Summer event, because the Infinity stories have been done to death. Like there's so many Infinity stories, but like Wolverine returning to Marvel Comics is a big deal. Like people are pretty hyped about it. I'm pretty excited about it to see what direction they go in. But initially what we do here is we pick up with a group called the Reavers in Alberta, Canada. Now, this is cool because what this does is this throws back to the old Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, like 247 to 249, I think. Don't take that as an absolute truth. I'm probably wrong. So here was the whole idea. The Reavers originally, back in like Uncanny X-Men 229, I think it was, they were originally just like a group of people who were like criminals, more or less. They were small-time villains. What Claremont did is he basically took the character of Donald Pierce, who was a member of the Hellfire Club, and launched a set of Reavers under him. Now, the way that Claremont did things, this is the important thing to bear in mind, and as much as I would love to, I've always wanted to go back and cover like the whole Chris Claremont 17-year run of the X-Men, because it's my favorite era of all time, but it is 17 years of comics, and that's just an ridiculous attempt. Like, I don't even know if that would ever work. The whole thing is that he would go through and he would like introduce characters in particular roles. Like the Hellfire Club was just like, you had the main Hellfire Club and then you had the inner circle. By and large, they're used interchangeably. Like if you're standing in a line at a comic book store and somebody references the Hellfire Club, they're talking about the inner circle, is basically what it means. But what you had is it was basically modeled after like chess pieces. You had the White King, you had the Black King, you had the White Queen, you had the Black Queen, so on and so forth. Black Bishop, White Bishop. It was modeled after an actual chessboard. Donald Pierce was the Black Bishop. No, I'm sorry. I think he was the White Bishop. Maybe he was a Black Bishop. I don't remember. Anyway, he was like third or fourth in line in like, you know, the hierarchy of the Hellfire Club. The issue with this is that the way that his character was done, he basically hated mutants. And the idea was that because the Hellfire Club was composed of mutants, he was essentially a part of the group in order to try to like destroy it from the inside out, as well as like go on to take out various, you know, mutants that existed out in the world, things like that. Eventually he was ousted from the team. And that was Claremont's way of like removing Donald Pierce from the Hellfire Club and then spinning him off into his own stories to see if they would succeed. And they actually did. The Reavers under Donald Pierce were actually pretty cool. Like they were pretty amazing. A lot of what you're seeing here is a throwback to the old Chris Claremont stuff. And that's why it works, because it's a lot of the same people that were there before, like Pretty Boy, Skull Smasher, like these guys who were old school, going all the way back. Now the idea is that this kind of continues on to like the most logical conclusion of Chris Claremont's run. So basically at this point in time, Donald Pierce's Reavers are essentially just like guns for hire, but they've consistently failed. So they're basically screw ups. And this is like their last big job. But because of the fact that the Reavers are cyborgs, what they do is they basically take these jobs in an effort to like upgrade themselves. And we'll actually talk about the importance of that here in a second. But the overall goal is for them to essentially like take the adamantium statue of Wolverine and then in turn sell it. Now the reason why this matters is because remember, Wolverine died because he was encased in adamantium and his healing factor stopped working. And so because his healing factor stopped working, he was basically a human that was covered in metal. He basically suffocated. Now that is a legitimate way to kill Wolverine. If you take Wolverine Wolverine and you throw him under the water and you leave him there, he'll suffocate and he'll die. His body won't adapt. He won't learn how to breathe underwater. He'll just drown and he'll die, and that'll be the end of him. But Wolverine is basically dead for all intents and purposes. And so with this in mind, there are two main goals of the Reavers here. The first is to remove Wolverine from the adamantium, and the second is to sell off both, because the body of Wolverine is worth a fortune, but adamantium itself is worth so much money. I mean, it's the hardest metal in the world, and there really is no more adamantium anymore. I mean, the last of the adamantium was used to encase Wolverine. And so what they've stumbled into here, what they've come across, is the last bit of adamantium combined with Wolverine's body being stored inside, both of which can be sold off for a fortune. The problem with this is that security has been installed here, which you figured they would have suspected, but they didn't. They just kind of broke in, and then of course they end up hearing a bamf. That's the presence of Nightcrawler, and the X-Men immediately start responding. Now, this is a cool moment here. This is one of the reasons why I love this so much. By and large, when the X-Men fight against various villains throughout their entire publication history, when they're fighting against various villains, it's usually in like a city or something like that, or it's out in space or something along those lines. In this instance, they're out in the middle of nowhere. Kitty Pryde kind of comments on this and is like, there's no one here for miles. We can literally cut loose. We can do whatever we want to here. And this is actually the best case scenario for the X-Men and the worst case scenario for the Reavers. Because remember, with everything that's been going on with the X-Men so far, there's a lot of pent up aggravation here. And if they can take that out on the Reavers, then woe betide them. Now, the other part of this is we actually do this little bit of a flashback, and this is pretty important here, because what we find out is that after the death of Wolverine, a lot of people started showing up to pay the respect that you wouldn't expect here. One of them was Reed Richards. Now, again, when Wolverine lost his healing factor, it was due to a other dimensional virus that he had basically contracted. But with his healing factor being shut down, he started going to a veritable who's who of the Marvel Universe. Reed Richards, Tony Stark, your standard run-of-the-mill genius people, and said, is there a way for you to turn it back on? Reed Richards almost feels a little bit of guilt here, because there was no conceivable way for him to do it, but he also didn't apply like all of his resources to it. And that's one of the reasons why he feels a little bit of guilt here, is because if he had put everything in the world aside and said, we're going to figure out how to restore your healing factor, there's a chance it may have worked, but Reed didn't. And the result is that he feels a little bit of guilt over this. At the same time as people like Cyclops. Remember, Wolverine and Cyclops historically always had this kind of love triangle going on with Jean Grey. That Cyclops was in love with Jean Grey was in love with Cyclops, but she also kind of harbored feelings for Wolverine. That's the old Chris Claremont story. But over the years, despite this love triangle they had been involved in, there was a lot of respect between the two of them. You know, they kind of hated each other to a degree, but they also respected the other for what it is that they had done over the course of their lives and the work that they had put in. But that all came to a head during Schism, and Wolverine formed the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning, and Cyclops stayed with the Xavier Institute, and they went on to raise their own two separate groups of X-Men. But with that in mind, like, Cyclops still kind of says, look, like, there are things that I should have said. There are things that I should have told him that I never told him before. And so in this instance where they kind of ask the question, like, should we really just leave him here like this? Because somebody will stumble across it. It's inevitable somebody will learn about this somewhere along the line. And when they do, they're probably going to try to steal him. Should we leave him like this? Is this what he would want? Or should we find a different way? And the question is, well, I mean, we could find a different way, but like, how do we get Wolverine out of adamantium? It's literally the hardest metal in the universe. And that's when Colossus pops up and says, okay, like, I have a different idea. Like, I have an idea on what we can do to pull this off. Now, jumping back to the present day, this is what makes the Reavers so dangerous. So the X-Men's powers don't change. I mean, they can, Grant Morrison, during his run on New X-Men, introduced the idea of secondary mutations. They kind of happened to a degree under Chris Claremont, but it was like a once in a million kind of thing. Like, it almost never happened. With Grant Morrison, it was like, well, now it happens more frequently. Emma Frost gets her diamond form, different things like that. And so because X-Men's powers almost never change, they're by and large easy to defeat if you know how to counter their powers. But with Reavers, it's completely different. And it's kind of a checks and balances and trade-off. Most Reavers are nowhere near as powerful as the X-Men, but the Reavers' powers can change. They can upgrade, they can modify. One day a Reaver might be able to control some, magnetism on a small level. The next day he can control fire. That's how the Reavers function and form. And that's why they were always so interesting, is because in the old Claremont stories, when the Reavers popped up, you never knew what power they were going to have. You didn't really know like what they had changed, what they'd modified. And that's what gets hit on here. It's kind of like, we don't really know what to expect. Every fight with the Reavers has to be treated as a brand new fight because you don't know what they're going to be capable of this time around. But again, like, you got guys like Colossus, the osmium organic skin. Like, this guy is virtually indestructible depending on who it is that he's fighting. I mean, World War Hulk, of course, broke his arms, but still, like, when it comes to the Reavers, there's no real chance for them to be able to take him out. And so he's literally going through alongside the other X-Men and just crushing these guys bit by bit, piece by piece. Now, while that's happening, Donald Pierce, alongside one of the other Reavers, is basically breaking into the adamantium body or the adamantium statue of Wolverine, because that Reaver has the ability to manipulate the atomic structure of matter. And that's what ends up happening. Once they break through it, what we end up finding out is it's empty. There's nothing in there. Wolverine is not inside that adamantium case. And so that's when people start to panic because they're like, well, then where the hell did he go? Like, I mean, what happened? He obviously didn't break out because the thing's not damaged. So if he's not in there, then what happened to him? And so what we end up doing is jumping back to the past again, and we pick up with Kitty Pryde. Now, this is genius. This is one of the smartest things. And in truth, like, I want to say that I asked the question, why didn't they do this? But I don't think I did. Like, I can't take credit for that. Like, it never really occurred to me to say, like, why doesn't Kitty Pryde just remove him out of the adamantium? And it's cool because, like, when she sits down and does this, it's not like a simple thing, right? It's not like a MacGuffin, like, oh, Wolverine's an adamantium. Well, we'll just pull him out. Done. Like, it doesn't work that way. Instead, like, Kitty Pryde kind of makes this argument of, like, I can try to get him out, but there's no guarantees. He's got Wolverine in his, or I'm sorry, he's got adamantium in his bones. He's encased in adamantium. Being able to differentiate between the body structure of Wolverine and the adamantium encasing him is going to be incredibly hard. And if I screw up, I'll tear him apart. Like, I'll start to pull him out and his upper body will come out and he'll just have like adamantium just kind of hanging out of an adamantium case. It's cool. Like, it's a really, really genius and interesting idea. Now, ultimately, she's able to pull it off and she basically pulls Wolverine out of the adamantium and they essentially go through and just bury him. And that's what's awesome, is because you start having characters like Jubilee, these significant members. Dupe is there. Dupe is awesome. Those of you guys who don't know who Dupe is, like, he's amazing. Wolverine is the only person who understands what Dupe says. And like, nobody else understands what Dupe says. He's weird. But he's like adorable, and he's like the most adorable creation ever. But like, Dupe is there, and then you have, like, you know, the main roster of X-Men. That's something that I want you to notice here. The X-Men who are there are by and large the ones that had the biggest role in Wolverine's life, and that's the whole point of this, is to say, like, this is a throwback to the old X-Men comics. This is basically giant size X-Men minus like Angel and Iceman and Jean Grey. Like, that's essentially what this is, the original giant size X-Men team. And so it's interesting to see this because everybody's paying their respects. Everybody's saying, look, you know, we didn't always see eye to eye. We didn't always agree with each other, but at the end of the day, we had it where it counts. And so that's what ends up going on here is people begin sort of asking these questions of, like, what's going on? What in the world is taking place? Like, where did Wolverine go? Like, you know, what's happening? Now, the X-Men, again, in the interior group of the X-Men are by and large aware of what's going on. But at this point, like, kind of jumping back, we end up having like this really cool moment where Kitty Pryde is just sort of sitting down and like talking to the grave of Wolverine. Remember, this is not just like a random thing. They have a long history together. Like, Wolverine was in a lot of ways a father figure for Kitty Pryde, and that's the way her character was done. Back when Chris Claremont introduced Kitty Pryde into the X-Men, you had things like Storm, who taught her how to be a woman, because Kitty Pryde was kind of, you know, removed from her family at a very, very young age, when she was like 15 years old. And so as she was going through those coming of age experiences that every young person goes through, Storm helped to guide her through all those things that women need to come to grips with about how their bodies work. And then Wolverine was more of a father figure, teaching her how to deal with like boys and different things like that. But it was cool. It was very much like her being basically a child of the X-Men is really what it was. But as she basically pays her respects by pouring Canadian beer on Wolverine, which I don't know why you would drink Canadian beer, but like pouring Canadian beer on Wolverine, she sees like the garb he was wrapped in hanging on a tree. And that's when it kicks off. That's when she realizes, how could I have been so stupid? Like, how could I have been so dumb as to believe this? And so what we end up doing is basically like picking up with Wolverine himself, just like trashing a guy. And then somebody simply responds by saying, that's enough. Like, you need to stop. Don't do anything else. Like, that's it. And then Wolverine's basically just sitting back down again. And so the result is that the X-Men essentially dig up the grave and they realize Wolverine's gone. Like, he's out of there. No one knows where he's gone to. No one knows how he's out. But this is the important thing. It looks like either someone's training Wolverine, kind of like bringing him back to society, or someone's using Wolverine. Now, this would work. All right. A lot of people would look at this and say, really, somebody's using Wolverine as a weapon again? But it works because Wolverine is rooted in that. That's the basis of his character. Wolverine wasn't always a member of the X-Men. Like, Wolverine, I mean, he was born in 1800 whatever, and he fought in a whole bunch of wars. And when he got involved in Team X, and he was part of like the CIA Black Ops team, because of the fact that he had a healing factor alongside Sabretooth and like other members like Gray Fox and so on and so forth, they were grabbed and they were thrown into the Weapon X project, and they were basically used as weapons. That was the whole point. Like, Wolverine went on all these different Black Ops Strike Force missions with Team X being used as a weapon to topple governments, to take out political officials, to eliminate political rivals, all kinds of different things. Like, it was all manner of ideas. And then when he eventually was rolled into the Weapon X project, he was used as a weapon under Weapon X. So I mean, his whole life is rooted in all that stuff. It's rooted in all those different things. I knew it makes sense that if Wolverine came back, even if only for a short moment in time, he's essentially being turned into a weapon again. This is going to basically go in and coincide with the little one-page backup features of all these comics that explain where Wolverine's been, what he's been doing, what's been happening behind the scenes, and how he managed to pick up the Space Stone, I think it is. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.